Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's great to be back.
You know, there's a very specific kind of anxiety, a visceral feeling that you get when you walk through a city that's in the middle of rewriting its own history. I don't just mean like renovating a storefront or putting up a new building. I mean that atmosphere where the statues on the street corners have been smashed.
Right.
And not by some foreign army,
right,
but by the neighbors. There's this very particular tension when a civilization decides to just edit its own soul.
It's the visual language of a culture war, isn't it? You're literally seeing the physical editing of the past in order to, to curate a very specific future.
And that is exactly, precisely where we are dropping in today. We are in Alexandria, specifically the late 4th century. This is, you could argue, the moment the Roman Empire creates the template for how a whole civilization switches its gods.
It's a foundational moment.
We're looking at Serapis, the work by Georg Ebers. And while, yes, technically it's a historical novel, I think we need to be really clear right out of the gate. This is not some toga party adventure story.
Far from it, no. Ebers was an Egyptologist first and a novelist second. So what he's given us here is, well, it's essentially a primary source simulation. He's using his deep knowledge to reconstruct the friction of a single pivotal year, 391 AD.
Under the reign of Theodosius.
Exactly. The moment when Christianity makes the jump from being a religion in the empire to being the religion of the empire, and that transition was anything but smooth.
And that friction you mentioned, it isn't just, armies meeting on a battlefield somewhere. It's happening at a dinner table. It's happening in the accounting ledgers of an estate.
It's happening in every facet of life.
So the mission for this deep dive is really to look at the cost of that transition. When you decide to trade one big truth for another big truth, what gets lost in that trade? What's the collateral damage?
And more specifically, how do people justify that collateral damage? Because that is what Serapis is really about, I think. It's a study of the logical frameworks, the mental gymnastics even, that different kinds of people use to survive when their entire world flips upside down.
You have the zealot, the pragmatist, the philosopher.
All trying to navigate this ideological earthquake.
So let's try to place you, the listener, on the ground. Imagine you're walking down the Canopic Way in Alexandria. In the 4th century, this is the Fifth Avenue of the ancient world. It's the absolute apex of Mediterranean civilization.
You'd have sycamore trees, gleaming limestone palaces. You'd smell the sea mixed with, spices from the market. It's supposed to be this perfect picture of cosmopolitan life.
But if you look a little closer at the architecture, you start to realize something is deeply wrong.
It's kind of an uncanny valley effect, but for urban design. You have these magnificent colonnades, these grand public spaces, but the niches where statues should be, they're just empty.
Or worse, they're occupied by something that just feels wrong. The text describes this beautiful fountain that used to feature the Nile god surrounded by playing children. A celebration of fertility, of water, of life itself.
A classic, beautiful pagan image.
And now, the figures are just gone. They've been hacked away. The water just hits bare stone. It's a ruin, but it's a fresh ruin, a deliberate one.
And that sense of deliberate destruction is everywhere. There's a specific detail in the text that I think really gets to the heart of it. It's when we follow Carnus, an old musician. He's a man who lives and breathes the old aesthetics, the old beauty.
Yes, and he walks past a house he used to know. The house of Philippus. He remembers it being flanked by these incredible statues of Demeter and Pallas Athene.
And you have to understand, those weren't just, lawn ornaments to a Roman. The symbols were functional. Demeter was there to guarantee the harvest that funded the household. Athene was there to provide the wisdom to manage that wealth.
They were, in a very real sense, part of the spiritual infrastructure of the home. They were almost like members of the household.
But Philippus is dead now. The house belongs to his widow, Mary. And she's redecorated.
That's one way to put it. The goddesses are gone, chiseled off the facade, and they've been replaced by what the text calls coarsely wrought images of the Lamb.
That one adjective, coarsely wrought, there's so much heavy lifting in that sentence.
It implies a degradation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that in this mad rush for moral purity, for doctrinal correctness, aesthetic standards have just completely collapsed.
Yeah.
Mary doesn't care if the sculpture is beautiful.
No.
She only cares if it's the right sculpture. It's a huge signal that this new worldview prioritizes the message, the dogma, over the medium, the art.
And that is the central tension right there on that one house. The physical clash on the street is a perfect mirror for the intellectual problem the whole city is facing. The book's thesis seems to be that destroying these symbols, it's not just a simple change of decor.
No, it's an assault.
It's an assault on the soul of the land. It's about ripping out the psychological anchor of the common people.
Which brings us directly to Mary. I mean, if we're going to understand this book, we have to get inside her head. It's so easy to paint her as the villain, the fun-hating, art-smashing religious scold.
Classic caricature.
But Ebers gives her this frighteningly coherent logic. She isn't smashing statues because she hates art. She's doing it because she genuinely 100% believes they are radioactive.
That's the archaeological erasure protocol in action. To Mary, a statue of Demeter isn't heritage. It's a demon trap. It's a spiritual landmine.
Exactly. And if you truly believe that just looking at an idol, just being in its presence, could endanger your immortal soul for all eternity,
then destroying it isn't vandalism. It's an act of public safety. It's a form of spiritual hygiene, like cleaning up a toxic waste dump.
she's a kind of spiritual technocrat. She has a very clear goal, salvation, and she is optimizing all of her assets, her entire estate, to achieve that one single outcome.
And that relentless optimization leads us straight into the first major conflict of the book. The big argument between Mary, the zealot, and her brother-in-law, Demetrius, who is the ultimate pragmatist.
Ah, Demetrius. I love this character because he feels so incredibly modern. He's not a philosopher. He's not a theologian. He's the guy who looks at a spreadsheet and says, look, if we do X, we lose money. If we do Y, the farm is more productive. He's pure cause and effect.
He is the personification of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
He represents tradition, not for any high-minded philosophical reason, but because tradition works. It's stable. It's predictable.
He comes to Mary with the estate accounts, fully expecting a pat on the back. He's done an amazing job. He's basically doubled their revenue.
He's crushed it in modern terms.
Yeah.
But he walks right into a wall. Mary doesn't care about the profit margin anymore. The spreadsheet is irrelevant to her. She wants to know why the peasants on their lands in Cyrenaica haven't all been baptized.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road for their worldviews. She issues an ultimatum. It's not enough to just preach to the workers anymore. She orders Demetrius to evict anyone, any family, who refuses to convert to Christianity.
Just think about the scale of that for a moment. These are families that have worked that specific land for generations. Their parents, their grandparents. And she's telling him to use starvation and homelessness as a tool for conversion.
Her argument, though, is chillingly logical from her perspective. She literally says, what does earthly suffering matter compared to the eternal peril of the soul?
It's that terrifying math again.
It is. If I make you homeless for a year, but it saves you from an eternity of damnation, then I'm not being cruel. I'm doing you the biggest favor imaginable.
It's the ultimate utilitarian calculus, but only if you accept her variables, that heaven and hell are real and this is the only way to the performer. But Demetrius, he just doesn't accept them, and his reaction is so visceral, so physical.
He picks up a heavy bronze chair and just slams it into the floor. He's not just disagreeing with her. He is physically repulsed by her brand of mercy.
And his counter-argument is so fascinating because it has nothing to do with theology. He doesn't sit there and try to prove that Zeus is real or that the Olympians are more powerful. He argues for the soul of the land.
That's the core of it, the argument of property and faith. Demetrius gives her this incredible line. He says, you burn down the old house before you've collected wood and stone to build a new one.
That is such a powerful critique of any kind of radical revolutionary change. It frames this whole religious transition not as an enlightenment, not as building something better, but as a premature demolition.
He's trying to explain the psychology of the peasant, the farmer. He says, to that farmer, the little shrine in the field isn't some grand theological statement about the cosmos.
No, it's a tool. It's the user interface they have to interact with the forces of nature. They plant the seed, they pour the libation at the shrine, and they expect the crop to grow. It's a contract. It's a system that they understand.
And if you go in and you smash that interface, you break the contract. You destroy their system. You induce a kind of psychological panic. You've taken away their one point of contact with the divine forces that control their livelihood.
Exactly. Demetrius argues that if you take away their local, tangible god, the spirit of that particular field, and you try to replace it with this abstract, invisible, universal god in the sky, you aren't saving them. You're isolating them. You're making them feel powerless.
He uses this amazing phrase. He says, you are robbing him of all that encourages and rejoices his soul. He's identifying that traditional religion provides a localized sense of place, of meaning,
A universal god is a great concept for running an empire, maybe. It's an administrator's dream, but it's a terrible concept for a guy who just wants it to rain on his specific patch of dirt.
But Mary is unmoved. And the text reveals she has another motivation, one that's actually much more self-serving and personal. And this is where the book kind of turns into a detective story about historical revisionism. It's all about her late husband, Apelles.
Yes, the martyrdom complex. This is a huge piece of her psychology. Mary is obsessed, absolutely obsessed with getting the church to officially recognize Apelles as a martyr.
She's pouring money into monasteries. She's schmoozing with bishops. She's essentially trying to buy a narrative that Apelles died for the faith.
Because that narrative validates her own position. If she is the widow of the great martyr Apelles, she has immense status in this new Christian hierarchy. It washes away any sins of their family's past. It creates a noble Christian lineage for her son, Marcus.
But Demetrius, his brother, knows the truth. And the truth is, it's awkward.
Awkward is putting it very, very mildly. The truth is devastating to her project. Apelles wasn't a secret Christian hero. He was a closeted intellectual who secretly read Lucretius.
And let's just pause for a second for anyone who hasn't dusted off their philosophy textbooks lately. Lucretius is the author of On the Nature of Things. He is a hardcore Epicurean.
Which, in the 4th century Christian context, is basically tantamount to being a militant atheist. Lucretius argued that the entire universe is just atoms colliding in a void. There are no gods meddling in human affairs. There is no afterlife. There is no divine judgment.
So just to be clear, Mary is trying to get the church to canonize a man who didn't even believe heaven existed.
It is a staggering level of cognitive dissonance, or perhaps a staggering level of cynical maneuvering.
And it gets worse. Demetrius reveals that Apelles didn't die for the faith either. He died because he was on a business trip carrying a saddlebag stuffed with gold for a grain deal in Petra.
He wasn't killed by Saracens because he refused to renounce Christ. He was most likely shanked by his own servant who wanted the cash.
That is just such a brutal juxtaposition. The glorious narrative died for the glory of God, and the grubby reality, stabbed for a bag of coins.
But look at what Ebers is showing us here. He's giving us a micro-history of how official narratives are manufactured. Mary needs the lie to secure her social standing. The church is happy to accept the lie because it comes with a very large donation check.
And the only person standing in the way of this convenient fiction is Demetrius, the one man who actually remembers the man as he really was.
His integrity is the obstacle, and that integrity ultimately forces him out. He tells Mary, "I will not go to church because I scorn a lie." And it's so interesting that the heathen in this story is the one obsessed with objective truth, while the pious believer is perfectly comfortable building her life on a useful fiction.
That's the great inversion the book plays with over and over. Demetrius is the ethical center of the story, but he's the one who's being purged from this new society.
And while Demetrius retreats to the farm, defeated for now, there is another intellectual force pushing back against Mary and the Christian tide. We have to talk about Olympias.
The high priest of Serapis.
The high priest, the master conspirator, and the man who genuinely believes he can outdebate Christianity into submission. He's hiding out in the house of a wealthy pagan sympathizer, a man named Porphyrius. And he has this incredible scene with a young Christian girl named Agna.
Agna is the perfect foil for him. She's a singer, she's devout, and she is utterly terrified of these people. She's been taught her whole life that they worship stocks and stones. She's expecting to meet demons with horns and tails.
And instead, she gets a calm, gentle, grandfatherly figure who gives her a private lecture on Neoplatonism.
He starts with the pilot analogy. It's brilliant. He asks her, very simply, if you see a ship sailing into the harbor, skillfully avoiding the rocks, steering a true course, do you assume it's just moving by chance?
No, of course not. You assume there's a pilot. Someone is steering it.
Then he points up to the stars. He gestures at the perfect, predictable movement of the heavens. He says, the ordered courses of the stars imply a great pilot. It's the classic teleological argument. The argument from design.
The watchmaker argument, centuries before the watch was invented.
Exactly. And he's not doing it to prove her wrong. He's trying to establish a baseline. He's trying to say, look, we both believe in a creator. We both believe in a divine intelligence behind the universe. He's trying to show her that the gap between their beliefs isn't the giant chasm she imagines.
He's de-escalating her fear. He's essentially telling her, your God is our God and our God is yours. And this is the absolute core of his philosophy, which is syncretism.
The idea that the divine, what he calls the primal one, is just too vast, too immense for any single name or any single story.
So humanity, in its wisdom, invented different interfaces, different names, to access different attributes of that single divinity.
So when a Greek sailor worships Poseidon,
They aren't actually worshiping a bearded old guy with a trident. Not really. They are worshiping the divine power as it is manifested in the awesome, terrifying power of the ocean. Poseidon is just the name for that interface.
and Demeter for the harvest.
The divine power manifests in the life-giving fertility of the cornfield. Apollo is the divine charm of music. It's an incredibly sophisticated and, frankly, very appealing argument.
He tells Agna, we don't worship the stone or the statue, Agna. The statue is just a focal point. It's a lens to help our weak human minds focus on the abstract, divine idea that it represents.
And then he takes it a step further. He tries to fold her own faith, Christianity, into his grand syncretic system. And this is the part that usually blows people's minds when they first encounter it. He draws a direct functional line between the goddess Isis and the Virgin Mary.
The lament of Isis.
Exactly. He explains the ancient Egyptian myth of Osiris, the benevolent god king who is murdered, the sorrowing mother goddess Isis who searches for his body, his eventual resurrection, and the promise of eternal life that this story offers to all believers.
And he looks right at Agna and says, look at the emotional shape of this story. It's the same story as yours. A divine savior who passes through death to redeem the world.
He makes it so personal. He asks her, if your name were Ismene instead of Agni, would you be a different person? He's arguing that the essence of the faith, the mercy, the love, the hope for an afterlife, is identical. The only difference is the vocabulary, the names.
It makes the violence happening on the streets seem so incredibly tragic and pointless. If Olympias is right, then these mobs are tearing the city apart over semantics. Over which label to put on the exact same bottle of wine.
But Agni, and this is crucial, she doesn't buy it. She is clearly moved by his argument, by his kindness, but she resists it.
Why? Why does she resist?
Because for the devout monotheistic believer, the label is the truth. The history, the specificity, it matters profoundly. To Agna, Christ isn't just an attribute of the primal one who represents loving kindness.
Right. He is a specific person who lived at a specific time in a specific place and did specific things.
Yes. He is a historical reality. You can't just syncretize that away into a generic myth. For her, the uniqueness of the Christ event is the entire point. It's not one of many paths, it is the path.
And that resistance, that inability to bridge the gap with logic, leads Olympias to deploy his most dangerous weapon.
And it's not his philosophy. No, it's art.
The trap of beauty.
The perfect name for it. Agna is a singer with a beautiful voice. And there's this moment in the garden where she's persuaded to sing the old heathen hymns with Gorgo, the lady of the house. And as she sings, she feels something she knows she's not supposed to feel.
She feels the sublime. She is moved to tears by the beauty of the music and the nobility of the story in the hymn, the lament for Isis, and that terrifies her.
It creates an intense cognitive dissonance. If these are demon songs, as she's been taught, why do they feel so noble? Why do they make her soul soar? Why does a song to a false goddess feel so true?
And Olympias knows this is his trump card. He tells the old musician Carnus, reason is a feeble weapon against their faith, but art will go to the heart.
Ew.
He knows that if he can just get Agna to sing for the god Serapis in the temple, he doesn't need to win the philosophical argument.
The music will do the work for him. It will bypass the logical, dogmatic part of her brain and connect directly with her emotions, with her soul.
It's a battle for the subconscious. Art can bypass the firewall of dogma that reason can't penetrate. Olympias believes that if people can just feel the beauty of the old ways one more time, the new, strict, unadorned version of Christianity will feel cold and alien and empty by comparison.
But while Agna's being tortured by this very high-minded aesthetic conflict, we have to talk about the character who seems to be operating in a completely different dimension from everyone else.
We have to talk about Dada.
Dada, the wonderful, chaotic counterpoint to all of this heavy philosophy and theology.
Dada is the chaotic neutral of Alexandria. She isn't a zealot, she isn't a pragmatist, and she sure as heck is not a philosopher. She's a singer and a dancer who just wants to live her life and have a bit of fun.
And that's what makes her such a great character. She acts as a kind of control group in this experiment. She isn't driven by big ideas or eternal salvation. She's driven by whim, by pleasure, by how people are treating her in this very moment.
And there's this fantastic subplot where basically every man in the book tries to project their worldview onto her and control her. Marcus, Mary's devout Christian son, wants to save her soul from the vice of being a performer.
He sees her as a project for salvation. Then you have Demetrius, the pragmatic farmer, who, in a clumsy attempt to get her away from his brother, just tries to buy her company for the night with a big purse of gold.
And she rejects them both, spectacularly. The scene where she kicks Demetrius's gold coins across the floor of her room is just pivotal. She's asserting that she is not a commodity to be bought, and she is not a charity case to be saved. She's a person.
She rejects the spiritual condescension of Marcus and the gross materialism of Demetrius. She wants to be seen for who she is.
I really want to highlight that one scene on the boat. She's on a pleasure cruise. She sees Constantine, this handsome Roman officer, on another boat. She wants his attention.
What does she do?
She doesn't quote scripture at him. She doesn't discuss the nature of the atom with him. She takes her expensive, beautiful fan, and she just throws it into the water.
Just to make him have to fish it out for her.
It's so petty and so human and so wonderful.
It's a crucial reminder of humanity. While all the intellectuals are plotting revolutions and the zealots are planning citywide purges, Dada just wants a human connection. She wants to flirt. It grounds the entire story.
It reminds us that the people these grand ideologies are fighting over are actually just messy, impulsive, complicated human beings who are often far more interested in a handsome officer than in the precise nature of the Trinity.
But the revolution is coming.
Yeah.
We can't ignore the storm clouds that are gathering. Olympias isn't just sitting around in gardens chatting about philosophy. He is actively planning a war.
He is. And his plan is, let's just call it optimistic, dangerously optimistic. He actually envisions a new Greek empire rising from the ashes of Christian Rome.
He thinks he can lead an intellectual and spiritual counter-revolution. He even describes the standard, the flag that his army is going to carry into battle. And it is the ultimate syncretic mashup.
It's a bust of the god Serapis, but with the head of Zeus, and on his head he's wearing a corn measure. And the whole thing is surrounded by the signs of the zodiac.
It's like a logo designed by a committee. It's trying to be all things to all people. He thinks with this one symbol, he can unite the peasants who care about the harvest, the corn measure, the old guard traditionalists who revere Zeus, and the superstitious masses who follow astrology, the zodiac.
He thinks he can unite all of them against the monolithic, unified force of the Christian Church and the Roman Empire.
It's the classic delusion of the intellectual, isn't it? The belief that a better idea, a more clever argument, or a more inclusive symbol can somehow stop a legion of soldiers.
He truly believes the world runs on logic and aesthetics. He thinks if he just shows the people this perfect, all-encompassing symbol, they will naturally rally to his cause. He's about to get a very harsh lesson that history is more often governed by steel and fire than by clever graphic design.
And we can't forget the class divides that the text is so sharp about. They're woven through this whole conflict.
Absolutely. On one side, you have the money bag Christians, like Mary, who are using their immense wealth as a weapon to enforce belief.
Then on the other side, you have the intellectual heathens, like Olympias and Carnus, who live in this rarefied world of high concepts, philosophy, and art. They're mostly disconnected from the realities of the street.
And caught in the middle are the peasants.
The peasants, who just want their harvest to be blessed. They're the ones represented by that little corn measure on Olympias' grand standard.
And they honestly don't care if the God doing the blessing is called Serapis or Christ, as long as the corn grows. But they are the ones who suffer when the elephants fight.
They are the ones Mary evicts from their homes, and they are the ones Olympias is planning to use as foot soldiers in his doomed revolution.
It paints this really bleak picture of a society where the elite fight over the name of God and the poor just try to survive the consequences of that debate.
A tale as old as time, really.
So we've unpacked the characters, the philosophy, the art, and the politics. Now, as is our tradition here on Talk Treatises, we like to take these powerful ideas and run them through a couple of thought experiments.
The fun part, where we get to break things.
Exactly. But first, the standard disclaimer. These experiments are for entertainment and educational purposes only. We are just stress testing the logic of the text in a modern context. We aren't endorsing any of these outcomes.
Proceed.
Okay, thought experiment number 1. The archaeological erosion protocol.
Ooh, that sounds ominous. I like it.
So imagine a modern scenario. Let's say a new ideology becomes completely dominant. It could be a new political system, a new global religion, anything. And a core tenet of this ideology is that all physical symbols of the past, statues, monuments, certain books, old architecture, actively prevent the saving of the population's mind. They emit a kind of ideological poison.
Okay, so you're taking Mary's logic and applying it to the modern world on a global scale.
Precisely. Mary's argument is destroy the shrine to save the soul. The logic is that the physical object itself is a source of corruption.
Right. It's not just a symbol, it's an active agent of spiritual harm.
So the test is this. If we apply that logic rigorously, is it morally justifiable to destroy the pyramids of Giza or the Colosseum in Rome or the Statue of Liberty? If a group genuinely and fervently believes that those structures are blocking the spiritual or mental salvation of all humanity.
Wow. Okay. That really tests the limits of the martyrdom and salvation argument, which is Mary's side against Demetrius's heritage and soul of the land argument.
You accept Mary's premise that the soul is eternal and the statue poses an eternal threat to it. Then logically, you must destroy the statue. The statue is finite, the soul is infinite. The math is brutal, but it dictates destruction. It's the only rational choice in that framework.
But if you accept Demetrius's premise that those structures aren't just stone, they are the physical anchors of human identity, of history, of cultural stability, then destroying them is an unforgivable act of psychological violence. You are lobotomizing the culture.
It's the argument over the Bamiyan Buddhas, scaled up to the whole world. The Taliban destroyed them because, in their framework, they were idols, a source of spiritual poison. The rest of the world was horrified because, in our framework, they were priceless heritage.
And the book Serapis forces us to ask, is there ever a point where the perceived moral health of the present generation outweighs the preservation of the entire past? Or is the past the only foundation upon which any moral health can actually be built?
Demetrius would say, if you erase the past, you don't create a pure new world. You create a rootless, anxious, amnesiac people who are incredibly easy to manipulate.
Which is a terrifying thought, and a perfect lead-in to the next one.
Okay, thought experiment number 2. The universal translator of faith.
I like the sound of this one. Less destructive.
A little. This is based entirely on Olympias' primal one theory. So imagine a device, let's call it the theological fish, a little nod to Douglas Adams that you put in your ear. It doesn't translate language, it translates religious concepts into their core functional utility.
Into their function. Okay, give me an example.
So if a Christian says the word prayer, the device translates it to the listener not as prayer, but as a period of focused meditation on hope and appeal for intervention. If a heathen says, I must sacrifice a goat to Demeter, the device translates it as, I must perform an act of ritual gratitude for the success of the harvest.
Okay, so it strips out all the proper nouns, all the specific theology, and just leaves the underlying human function, the hope, the gratitude, the fear.
Exactly. So here's the test. If a devout 4th century Christian like Agna and a devout 4th century heathen like Olympias spoke to each other through this device, would they finally realize they're saying the same thing as Olympias claims? Or would the specifics they can no longer hear, the dogma, the history, remain an unbridgeable gap?
That is the ultimate question of syncretism, isn't it? Olympias is betting everything on the idea that the gap is just vocabulary. Isis versus Mary, Zeus versus God. He thinks if you use the translator, you'll see it's all the same.
But Agna, in the book, she implicitly suggests otherwise. She would refuse to use the device. You would say, no, the difference isn't the function. The difference is the history. It's the facts.
Right. For Agna, the specific, singular historical event of the crucifixion and resurrection is what matters. You can't just translate that away into a generic function like a story symbolizing sacrifice and redemption. To do so is to destroy the meaning.
So the implication of the thought experiment is human conflict over religion caused by the essence of belief, or is it caused merely by the vocabulary of belief?
If Olympias is right, we are just fighting over words, and peace is just a translation away. But if Agna is right, we are fighting over competing realities. And Serapis seems to suggest that while the philosophers and intellectuals might love the universal translator, the true believers, the Marys and the Agnes of the world, would smash the machine.
Because for them, the specific is the sacred.
Yes. And perhaps that's the tragedy the book is pointing to. That's why the conflict was ultimately inevitable. You simply cannot compromise on what you believe to be the one and only absolute truth.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to chew on. Let's try to wrap this up. What is the final synthesis here? What should we take away from this deep dive?
For me, Serapis is a masterful portrait of a world in the painful process of losing its pluralism and being forced into a singular truth. It shows us that this kind of ideological transition is never clean. It's messy, it's violent, it breaks things, and it breaks hearts.
And it really, really highlights the profound difficulty of being a moderate person like Demetrius in an age of spiraling extremism.
Demetrius is the tragic hero here, absolutely.
Yeah.
All he wants to do is farm his land, treat people decently, run a good business, and respect the past. But the world is forcing him to choose a side in a holy war he doesn't even believe in. He has no place in the new world.
As we close out, I want to leave our listener with that one image we talked about, the image of the fan in the water.
That is fan.
Yes. In the midst of all this earth-shattering talk of smashing statues, of saving souls, of overthrowing empires, and defining the very nature of God, you have this young woman who just throws her fan in the water to make a handsome boy look at her.
A small, playful, deeply human act of connection in a city that is literally tearing itself apart over abstract ideas.
Maybe that's the real soul of the land that Demetrius was trying to protect. Not the shrine, not the church, but just the simple, everyday, messy business of people trying to live their lives in the space between them.
I think you might be right.
Thanks for listening to Talk Treatises.
Until next time.